All righty. Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Lindsay Benitez, founder of Lindsay B Coaching and a certified coach passionate about empowering confident, authentic leaders. I'm doing this LinkedIn Live series where I'm bringing in fellow founders that I've met along my entrepreneurial journey, first gen trailblazers, and just incredible friends who are breaking barriers, redefining success, and inspiring me and hopefully you too. And Angel Cruzado just happens to be all three of those: founder, first gen trailblazer, and friend. Angel is the founder and CEO of Reinspiration, a bootstrapped minority business certified company reimagining outplacement with deep empathy, AI, and community. A longtime HR leader and first gen college grad, Angel built Reinspiration to make sure no one goes through a career transition alone. He's led people operations at VC, PE, and public companies as a recruiter, HRBP, and head of HR, and has relocated multiple times to grow his career. It hasn't always been easy. There were sacrifices, trade offs, and things he'd do differently. And I'm sure we can get into some of that today. But those experiences now fuel how he builds, leads, and supports others. Angel helps people rebound faster with job search coaches, AI tools, and a powerful framework called the career prayer, turning uncertainty into clarity and momentum. Angel, thank you for joining me today. And can you believe our 1 year friend anniversary is coming up in July? I was just looking back
Oh
to
my
see.
God, Lindsay, thanks for having me. I'm thinking about the lunch at Granville. I mean, was that about a year? I think it's
I looked
about a
back.
year.
I'm like, when did we
Yeah,
first connect? It was in
yeah,
July last
yeah.
year.
That was a great meal. I think it was like 2 hours. Like, it was like our first meet and greet, and then we hung out at the um HR of HR person of the year, I think.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
the
remember that?
NHRA gala. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks
I
for
think that's
having
a
me.
cool, sorry to interrupt, just a cool example of, I think we might have been like LinkedIn friends first, but never really knew each other. And so
Yeah.
thank you for reaching out and just connecting. Because I think you mentioned like we had some similarities, like we should know each other.
Yeah, I think I do that a lot. I'm like, hey, you've got an interesting background. How can I help? Right. And
Love
I
that.
think that's kind of one of the things that I think about. Um, when you're building a company, it's a very lonely experience. And so the reach outs become core.
Yeah.
And it's one of the tenets of building. So
Yeah. And I'm grateful you did reach out because for people that don't know us yet, they don't know that we meet pretty much every month. And I think the
yes,
cool
we
part is Angel is so generous with his ideas, his sharing, challenging me a little bit like, Lindsay, come on, you want to build something a little bigger and faster, right? So AI, you're my AI guy too. Like there's a
Yeah,
lot
I
I've
have a
learned from you.
reputation for doing that. Like if you talk to like Demario and I started that way. We were introduced through Torin. And then Rocio also like that. I think, I just take interest in people and their careers, and there's a lot of value add in sharing, but there's also a lot of value add in receiving. And I've
Yeah,
received a lot, and I'd like wherever I can to be of help. So,
love that. Before we get started in some questions, there's a
okay.
lot happening in the world right now. We're both in LA, we're both Latino leaders, and there's just a lot. So
Yeah.
I'm going to start there. How are you feeling? And I'm going to tell you what I tell all my clients and anyone I work with. Don't say, I'm good, I'm fine, I'm busy. I really want to know, how are you doing?
It's a tough one for me, right? Because I like Puerto Rican, grew up in Red Sox Nation. My parents came to the United States with the passport. I think their journey is very different from those folks who kind of came into the United States in a different way. And protesting over the weekend in downtown, I could have done it in Studio City, but I wanted to kind of be like right in the middle of la gente, the
Mm-hmm.
people, like just kind of being there. And it's a little bit painful, to be quite frank, right? And I'm curious how people will support like the Latino plight, like overall as a community. And that's like when I'm talking about like, gay, lesbian, I'm talking like the African Americans, I'm talking about the Puerto Ricans and the Cubans. And, how do we support really like la gente, like the people that are being impacted most in Los Angeles? Like, we're kind of ground zero for immigration. So
Yeah.
It's painful for me. And so wherever I can, I'm there, but it's not an easy place to be quite frank. So.
Yeah. And I hear that thank you for sharing that. I hear that from a lot of people, friends, family. I actually worked with a really amazing company yesterday who brought me in to do a guided conversation around this topic, because smart companies know that their people are not being as productive if they don't have a place to let this emotion out. Right. So I think
And a
there's
lot of folks are not even talking about it, to be quite frank. Like I've talked to a lot of like Latino leaders, and they're like, it's like business as usual.
Yeah.
And that's also quite painful, because it was like we went through this movement with the Black Lives Matter movement, and folks sort of like rallied together to kind of like support that, white, Black, Asian, Chinese, everyone's like Black Lives Matter, and then like Latinos are being deported, and people's like, just kind of like looking the other way. So in a way,
it's hard because it doesn't. I mean, unfortunately, if it doesn't affect you, it's easier to not look, right? But I think what's interesting about what's happening is immigration is not a Latino thing. So, there's definitely been a roller coaster. I'm hearing from a lot of people that there's just a lot of overwhelm. And I think that when there is overwhelm, take a pause, check in on what's actually adding to that overwhelm, because that's not it, right? So for me, I was definitely feeling overwhelmed last week. It was sadness for what's happening, anger at the rhetoric, especially around Latinos, because Latinos are a force, and we are one of the fastest growing populations of business owners, which we'll talk about. And I think there's just a mismatch of what's happening. But right now I'm feeling a little empowered, because the conversation yesterday, creating spaces like this to have these meaningful conversations and to provide visibility, right? Latinos are very different. Like, you're Puerto Rican, I'm Salvadorian. Like, we have so many different angles to our stories. So the empowerment and the visibility and the joy of what we're about to talk about is what I'm trying to hold on to right now. So I hope that whoever's listening can grab onto that too.
Thank you. Thanks for checking in. Really appreciate it.
Of course. And everybody who's listening, check in with each other. Again, don't allow good, fine, busy. Like, that's the cop out. And I know it can be uncomfortable to talk about emotion and feeling, but if we don't know what's going on with the other person, we don't know how to actually talk to each other, right? And that's what I teach. I teach communication, awareness, empathy, recognition. So it's really important to have those conversations. But to get started onto the topic at hand, so want to start, as I shared your bio, you're also in HR, or you were in HR. I'm curious.
I'm in HR.
You're in HR, yeah.
I'm totally in HR.
What led you, though, to pivot from the traditional HR role to building your own company? Did you always imagine you would build your own company?
No, I mean, I'll be quite frank. It was like I was the head of people for a gaming company, and my role was impacted. I think it was during COVID. And so I laid myself off and half the team. And I always was sort of like a backdoor outplacement guy, where I would reach out to people that I transitioned off the payroll. So even though they were impacted through a redundancy, a job elimination, reduction in force, manager-employee mismatch, I always sort of checked in with the individual that was impacted. So that's how the journey started a little bit. Like, from an HR point of view, I laid off my first half the company in my first startup. And then a couple years later, Silicon Valley Bank, maybe 3 or 4 actually, I did it again. And so I laid myself, and I kept on helping people that I impacted, and I laid myself off as well. And that journey started with like, well, I should probably be a fractional head of HR. So I went fractional. So I sort of went and started building a lifestyle company, right? We've talked about that, right? So a lifestyle company is your ability to kind of build a lifestyle that suits your purpose, right? So and that's how I started my career in building a company. And then one thing led to another, in a sense that as a fractional head of HR, you take on business and clients and the agencies. And I realized at that point in time, I think 10 months in, I realized that the work that I was doing as a fractional head of HR was pretty amazing, but it was also very complicated, because you have to learn California law, Washington law, benefit brokers, payroll providers, HRIS systems, and you're limited in time to be able to do that. But at the same time, I had other HR people who are reaching out to do some of the outplacement. So my career really started, to be quite frank, just swinging the bat, being a fractional head of HR, going after it, being an S corp, and then 10 months later pivoting to a C corp to build out Reinspiration. So Reinspiration wasn't born. Reinspiration has only been around, I'd say, for about 16, 18 months. But the work that I've done to set the foundation for Reinspiration has been around for about 10, 15 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you ever imagine you were going to be an entrepreneur, CEO of your own thing?
I did own a food truck, right? So
cool. I didn't know that.
I did own a food truck in Berkeley. I think I wrote a couple business plans in college. I knew that I wanted to work for, I really enjoyed the work when I was at Medtronic. I really enjoyed the VC-backed world, like tons. But I didn't know that I was in the VC-backed world when I was working.
Okay.
I just knew that I was working for a big corporation like Medtronic. But when I look back at that experience, I was like, why did I leave Medtronic for Microsoft? And so I did realize that as I reflected on my career at Microsoft and post Medtronic, that I really was sort of like more well-tuned to working with like early stage companies that are going through their own challenges. But I didn't know that because, when your mom's a house cleaner and your dad's a machine operator, you don't really get that space where you can kind of reflect and have that conversation.
No, yeah. I don't have anyone around me in my family that has started a business like this. No. I was laughing a little bit, reflecting on our conversation earlier, where I'm like, did I ever think of being an entrepreneur or founder? And I can say no, but then I was thinking back, like I was a preteen selling Avon and keychains and other little things, candy to my family. So there was always something there about entrepreneur.
Yeah, I don't think I owned a lemonade stand. I think I remember knocking on doors to like, hey, can I shovel your snow? And then when the leaves would fall, I'd be like, hey, can I rake your leaves for $10? So I always had that hustle. But the hustle of like putting a shingle up and figuring out like your go-to-market strategy, like, no, I did not have that. That was not something that was natural for me.
Yeah. So you're building a business and you have a really unique intersectionality. You're Latino, yes, but you're also a parent. So I'd love to hear how does that influence how you're building this business?
It's tricky because when you're building a company, like you have to sort of build like these philosophies, right? Like you have to sort of build like, all limitations are self-imposed. Like you tell that to yourself, like every day, like all limitations are self-imposed. Like, and so you have to kind of live that value. You have to be sort of like at your core, also build a philosophy of like every day is like a Saturday. And so you can't treat your day like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, like an 8 to 5. It's not an 8 to 5. Mm-hmm. And so when you co-parent, when you have your kid, typically everyone has their own residential schedule or custody plan. Mine, tends to be that Wednesday and Thursday evenings, like are my times with Iris, and then every other weekend, Friday to Monday. And so when you're building, you kind of have to take in like pick up and drop offs at the school or gymnastics and theater. And what I've realized as a human in building is you have to sort of like build when you have time, but you can't limit your time based on the 8 to 5. Mm-hmm. So my values are like deep empathy, AI, and community is kind of how I work. And then my life values is to live every day like it's a Saturday, and then also live that, all limitations are self-imposed. And so that's how, in some ways, how I manage my calendar and my time. And then I use clearly like technology, like use Motion to record my meetings, to kind of recap when I'm not like 100% fully on. Like use Motion will kind of come in. I can go back and look at the meeting that I just had, either read the transcripts or even watch myself on video. Or if I'm in a team meeting, it actually supports me in engaging and providing the team action items to move forward. So I don't know. I don't know if that answers the question. Kind of long-winded, but it's kind of.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. What about, with this business, I'm curious to hear, we are testing and trying.
Yep.
Each of us has our own type of business, but what has been something that you've learned? Maybe it was something you used to call a failure, a mistake, but what's
Yeah.
something that you've learned throughout this? You said it was like 16, 18 months.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of the things that I've learned is like you have to swing the bat and you kind of have to go after it. And if you're building a company and it's self-funded, like it's revenue funded, you're on your own and your burn rate is 2x. It's your company's burn rate, right? In terms of like, and then like the loss of actually not having income. And what I've learned is that you have to be incredibly focused in terms of what you're going to do and not going to do, but you also have to be very open-hearted to like listen for feedback, and the feedback comes in different phases. I think I've shared with my team, and my team knows this, that like Memorial Day weekend is like when I have the board meeting, like it's the annual board meeting where I reflect on the last 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and I write down pen to paper what's working and not working. And so the learning process is like, you got to think about it on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, but you also have to think about like your path forward over the next 3 to 12 months. And it's very stressful. It's I lost sleep last night, and you're like, why am I losing sleep? And I'm like, I think I'm losing sleep because I'm in the middle of my go-to-market strategy, right? In terms of like opening up our market, in terms of like, hey, listen, you should use Respirus to re-inspire transitions, and let me tell you why. But that's a pivot from actually building from scratch to be like, okay, like what do we do? What's our mission? What's our vision? What are our values? How do we work? How do we scale? How do we operationalize? Yeah. So.
Yeah, there's something that I've gotten a lot from you that I want to share too. You talk a lot about re-inspiration, and that's kind of the title of what we're talking about, like building re-inspiration. Because I think the core of what we both do is we want to help people. And I don't know about you, but I definitely thought I was going to get to do a lot more of that in my roles. And, you talked about layoffs, and they're so painful. And I've unfortunately done so many in my career. And I was always the one like, but I'm happy to look at your resume, happy with interview skills. Like, how can I help? And there's only so much people want to hear from HR in the moment that I'm unfortunately part of changing their lives and livelihood, right? But I think what's unique about what we both get to do in different ways is help people get re-inspired. And I love that that's the basis of your company name too, because career transitions, I'm trying to find a better word than they just suck sometimes if you don't have the right support and guidance around you.
Yeah, I think when I think about re-inspired, it's you have to have a baseline of like who you are as a human. And we lose sight of that at times because of the influences that you have. And specifically, like you start to kind of live a company's vision or mission and values. And you start to kind of forget like who you are as a human. You're like, you graduate, like as a first gen, I remember like, graduating from college and moving to New York City and like working incredibly hard and getting compensated for that and like getting promoted and then relocating to Wisconsin for grad school.
Wow.
And you're in this journey, and then you realize like you wake up one day, or at least this is what happened to me. Like I woke up at Microsoft and I was like, oh, this is super nice. I live on the top of Queen Anne Hill. I've got a Porsche. It's super, it's an amazing life, right? But I also was like, is that it? That can't be it. I was like, it can't be it, right? It's like you wake up, you're in Seattle, your family's in Boston, and you have just relocated from like Boston to Wisconsin to LA to Seattle. And what I would say is that like as a first gen, there's a lot of missed signals. And so when I'm reaching out to you, Lindsay, or when I'm reaching out to like Rocio or Demario or individuals, a lot of it is like, I don't want you to miss the signals. And I know there's no one else who's going to give you those signals because I didn't have it. And so sometimes I think it's a reality check for me in terms of like listening to the signals to make sure that like my own mistakes don't snowball into other individuals. And I see tons of people that are missing the signals. And so Respirus, really the work that we do is that when you lose your job and you're in transition and you have job loss trauma, that's a lot of pain, especially when you've lost your soul, who you are as a human, because you've channeled in all your work into that job in that company. And then that company, through no fault of its own, right? And everyone gets really angry at the company, through no fault of its own, has their own headwinds. COVID, mismatches because they overhired too many accounting people versus accounting and finance, or you're opening up a new market, or you've lost market share sales. And that company has to pivot. And they're gonna have to make some tough calls. And they're gonna have to look at their people and make that evaluation and make that transition and be like, shit, we're gonna have to figure out how to like redesign the organization. So now you have an individual who's like given them everything that they have. And then you have a company who's like, man, we have to pivot. This whole AI thing, the tariffs, is changing not what we do, but how we do it. And we have to pivot. So for me, it's like, how do you help the company and the individual to gracefully transition in such a way that respects and honors the work that that company did and compensated the employee, but to support the employee who also is in transition. And that's like the hardest part of this work, that I'm deeply focused on. How do you help individuals not get lost in this job loss trauma? And your work is really not get lost in losing yourself when you're working in a company.
Oh my goodness. There's so much you just said there too, that
a lot. Yeah.
It's personal, right? Even though as a company, and I've been in those rooms, unfortunately, where we have to make really hard decisions. And of course, it doesn't feel like it's not personal, especially if you've been there for so long, or you've given your life to a company and you've spent so much time and invested so much time, and all of a sudden the rug gets pulled out. Right. There's that. You're right. It is traumatic. There is so much uncertainty, and this is your livelihood, especially if, you're the breadwinner or not the breadwinner, you're supporting a family. Everybody has their own circumstance. Yep. So having that partnership with you and your career coaches is huge. And I'll tell you, my story was a little bit more self-imposed. I kind of quit on a whim, and don't recommend that to anybody, by the way. People say that to me all the time, like, oh, I wish I could do what you did. No, I had no. Thankfully, I had savings and a great partner, but like, no, I didn't have a business plan. I was just kind of like, I just had this deep need to help and teach. And that's all I knew when I first started. Like, I want to help, I want to teach, and I'm not getting to do that right now. So how can I? And it's definitely been, I love what you said, like swing the bat. Like, I'm testing, I'm trying. I know you are too, but I think what you've been really cool about in our monthly sessions is like, okay, well, how can you think bigger? How can you, and like what I've gotten from our conversations too is, I can't help as many people as I want to help if I don't scale. And if I don't have, thoughtful business plan too, right?
Yep.
Because that's just where I come from. Like I come with so much integrity, and, I just want to help everybody, but I can't do that if I don't have a sustaining business.
Well, let's talk about that, right? Because it's sort of like a lot of folks think that like, oh, I'm just going to like build a company. It's like, and no, it's like, you got to go back to you can't learn this. You're not going to learn this at Babson. You might learn a little bit of this at like Stanford, but really it's like they speak in code, right? Like, what is an ICP? You're like, it's your ideal customer profile. What is your MVP? It's like your minimum viable product. Like, what is your mission? What is your vision? Like, what are your values? What is it that you do? And by the way, can you articulate that in such a way that actually you can land the plane, right? And it's super hard to kind of learn this language of like being an entrepreneur or being a founder. I remember like LA Tech Week, LA Tech Week was really interesting, which is like a bunch of tech companies get together, and they they develop communities for the VC groups, which are the venture capital groups or the private equity groups, And it happens in October of each year. And it's funny, like you don't see a lot of like Latinos there, like at all. Like it's very, and it exists in our city. And I would encourage everyone to like look up LA Tech Week. And we're going to have an event. So we're excited about that, and that's more to come on that later. But there's a whole new way of thinking of how you build a company that scales. Right. And unless you lean in and figure out how to do that effectively by just stepping outside your comfort zone deeply, you're not gonna get there. Mm-hmm. And I remember like when someone's like, well, what do you do? And I was like, I would say like, oh, I work for, you know, like I'm building a company to support people in transition. And they're like, no, like what, like they were like, what do you do? You know? And then I was like, oh, I'm a founder. You know, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I didn't have it in me. I was like, am I a founder? Like the founder of like Facebook, or the founder of Microsoft, or the founder of Google? I didn't have that in me. And now when people ask me, I'm like, what do you do? It's like, I'm a founder. And like, oh,
I love that you said that.
Like, what are you working on? And then I was like, oh, I'm working on to solve this problem. But I didn't know that I was a founder at LA Tech Week. You know, I've come a long way. So.
I still struggle. I'm not gonna lie. I think I've been forcing myself to put it on things that I write, like founder and authentic leadership coach, like finding that title, because it's so different. Like I was on a path. I should, go down the HR or up the HR ladder. Like that was the vision. But yeah, there's something about like saying founder out loud that like, but we are, we are creating something.
What did you build? Right. Like what did you, like a founder is like, what did you build? And I'm like, I am building a company to support people in transition. And then you're like, well, what is your beachhead? Right. Which is like, what are you going towards? Right. And I'm like, well, I want to support people in transition today between private companies, but in the future, veterans to the private sector, or unemployed and underemployed at the state level to the private sector, or incarcerated and recently released to the private sector. Now, to get to that mission or vision or beachhead, it requires like thousands of conversations to be like, well, why do you want to do that versus everyone who's doing outplacement only works with senior executives, right? And I'm like, well, it's because it's not fair. Like if you're losing your gig, you should have access. Yeah. So how do you give access to people, right? And so like, well, shit, I have to democratize outplacement first. So I'm stepping into a legacy space to do that. So that's what that's what I'm building towards.
I love it. I love it. And we're coming down on time. I feel like we could talk forever, but I think what's so valuable here, and hopefully people are taking this away, is the visibility, right? There aren't that many Latino founders, you said, at Tech Week, but beyond. Thankfully, we're growing. I personally couldn't find a Latina coach that I could relate to, so I became the coach I wish I had, right? So there's a lot of that visibility that we can provide and awareness that we could provide. So super excited for you, and you're just getting started, so I can't wait to see everything that's coming. But if you could leave our listeners with just one piece of advice, some parting words for anybody who wants to start their own business, is in the middle of it, maybe thinking about it in the future, I would love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I would tell someone like I would have a conversation with yourself, like using AI, and say like, this is what I'm amazing at, and like help me build a company around it. I would have that conversation like immediately. Like I would go on AI, and then I would do that, and then I would basically say, based on what you're amazing at, like what is my mission or vision and what that could look like. And then how do I build it? Like just go in and use AI to learn different AI tools. If you're a W-2 employee and you're listening to this, man, I'm going to tell you right now, it's like the companies are not going to be able to facilitate the learning and development on the AI piece. It's deep, and you will have AI anxiety if you learn AI deeply and how it's working today. So I would encourage everyone who's listening to this to like build your own company so that you could implement and execute and use AI to build. your company is they're not gonna be able to teach you the platforms that are coming online to enable you to be incredibly successful in your career.
And that feels huge and daunting. Like I'm sitting here still like playing around with ChatGPT. So I've learned so much from you. We actually have a question around AI, but I know we're coming down on time. So we'll answer that afterwards. If you are listening to this or listen to the recording, ask us questions in the chat or in the comment section, and we will absolutely respond. I love somebody just said, like, we need to get and eliminate the word just. Like, I'm just a founder, I'm just this, because we're so much and we do so much and can support so many different people. And one thing that I'd love to leave everyone with, I know there's a lot of feelings around overwhelm, helplessness. I'm hearing this a lot of, I just don't know what to do. I'm just one person. But we hope that this conversation shows you how much one person can do, especially when we do this in community and together, and we're learning from each other and having really meaningful conversations. So listen, actively listen, learn from each other. And if you have any questions for either myself or Angel and how we could support you, your organizations, please reach out. Angel, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Of course.
Talking soon, like always.
I'm here for like anyone who's listening. So if they want to reach out, angel.cruzado@respiris.com. More than happy to like answer any of your questions. And I mean that, like, Lindsay, that's how we met, right? So love to meet anyone who just wants to reach out and just kind of like check in. So angel.cruzado@respiris.com. More than happy to like, facilitate an idea or build on an idea. I know that we're over time. Thanks for making the time to kind of hang out today. So
yeah, and we'll put contact information in the chat too, but I'll see you soon, Angel. Have a good one. Bye.
See ya.